What happens when one of the biggest movie stars in the world walks onto a beloved talk show and destroys her entire reputation in front of millions? In just 34 seconds, Margot Robbie went from America's sweetheart to the most hated woman on television, all because she couldn't handle a simple joke from Graham Norton. This is the story of how one actress let her ego spiral completely out of control. The Graham Norton Show is known for its relaxed, fun atmosphere. Celebrities come on, they laugh, they tell stories, they drink wine, and everyone has a good time. It's light. It's easy. Graham Norton himself is one of the most beloved hosts in the world because he knows how to make his guests feel comfortable while keeping the conversation entertaining. He's quick, he's witty, and he's never mean-spirited. That's why what happened on this particular night shocked everyone who was watching. Margot Robbie was scheduled to appear alongside two other guests. She walked out wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people make in a year, and right from the start, something felt off. The audience cheered for her like they always do, but when she sat down on that famous red couch, her energy was cold. She barely smiled. She didn't wave to the crowd. She just sat there with her arms crossed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Graham, being the professional that he is, tried to warm her up. He started with a light joke about her recent movie premiere, something harmless about how she must be exhausted from all the press tours. It was the kind of thing he says to every guest. A little acknowledgement that being a movie star is hard work, but also kind of glamorous. The other guests laughed. The audience laughed. Margot did not laugh. Instead, she stared at him and said, "Is that supposed to be funny?" The room went quiet. You could feel the temperature drop. Graham, still smiling because he's a pro, tried to move on. He said, "Well, I just meant you've been everywhere lately, which is wonderful. Everyone loves seeing you." But Margot wasn't letting it go. She leaned forward and said, "Maybe you should try being funnier instead of stating the obvious." The audience didn't know how to react. A few people gasped. The other guests on the couch looked at each other like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. And Graham, bless him, just laughed it off and said, "Noted. I'll work on that." He tried to change the subject. He asked her about her co-stars, about the filming process, about anything that might get her to relax and actually engage in the conversation. But every single answer she gave was short, dismissive, and dripping with attitude. When he asked if she enjoyed working with her director, she said, "It was fine." When he asked about a funny moment on set, she said, "I don't really remember." She was giving him nothing. The other guests tried to jump in and lighten the mood. One of them told a silly story about meeting Margot at an awards show, trying to bring some warmth to the conversation. Margot just sat there stone-faced, looking at her nails like she was bored out of her mind. When the guest finished the story, Graham turned to Margot and said, "That must have been a fun night." She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes on live television and said, "If you say so." Graham Norton has interviewed thousands of celebrities. He's dealt with shy guests, awkward guests, drunk guests, and everything in between. But he's rarely had someone be outright rude to him for no reason. Still, he kept his cool. He smiled and said, "You seem a bit tense tonight. Everything all right?" That's when Margot snapped. She sat up straight, looked directly at Graham, and said, "You know what? Maybe I'm tense because I'm tired of doing these ridiculous interviews where the host thinks he's a comedian. You're not that funny, Graham. You're just loud." The entire studio went silent. The audience was in shock. The other guests looked like they wanted to disappear into the couch. And Graham, for maybe the first time ever on his own show, looked genuinely hurt. But he's been in this business for decades. He knows how to handle a difficult guest. He took a breath and said, very calmly, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm just trying to have a conversation." But Margot wasn't done. She was just getting started. She pointed at him and said, "A conversation? You call this a conversation? You ask the same boring questions everyone else asks. You make the same tired jokes. You think because people laugh at you that you're special? They're laughing because they're told to laugh. The audience was dead silent now. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was clapping. They were all just watching this train wreck unfold in real time. Graham, to his credit, stayed composed. He said, "Well, I can only apologize if I've disappointed you. But I do think we should keep this respectful." Margot laughed. Not a real laugh. A mean, sarcastic laugh. She said, "Respectful? You want to talk about respect? How about respecting my time? I flew all the way here to promote my movie, and you're wasting my time with this nonsense." One of the other guests tried to step in. They said something like, "Come on, let's all just take a breath and..." But Margot cut them off. She turned to them and said, "Stay out of this. This has nothing to do with you." Graham could have fired back. He could have put her in her place. He could have made a joke at her expense, and the audience would have been on his side. But instead, he did something that showed exactly why he's so respected in this industry. He stayed calm. He stayed kind. He looked at her and said, "Margot, I don't know what's going on with you tonight, but this isn't okay. I've been nothing but welcoming to you. I've tried to make this fun, and you've been hostile from the moment you sat down. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be." That should have been the moment where Margot realized she'd gone too far. That should have been the moment where she apologized, or at least backed down. But she didn't. She stood up. She actually stood up from the couch and said, "You know what? You're right. I don't want to be here. This show is beneath me." The audience gasped. The other guests looked horrified. And Graham, still keeping his composure, said, "Then I think it's best if you leave." Margot grabbed her purse, looked at Graham with pure contempt, and said, "Gladly. Have fun with your little show." And then she walked off. Just walked right off the set while the cameras were still rolling. The audience didn't know whether to boo or stay silent. Graham watched her go, then turned to the camera and said, "Well, that was unexpected. Let's take a quick break." When they came back from the break, Graham didn't trash talk her. He didn't make jokes at her expense. He just said, "Sometimes things don't go as planned, and that's okay. Let's move on and have some fun." And then he turned his attention to the other guests and gave them the spotlight they deserved. He made sure the rest of the show was entertaining and warm and everything his show is known for. Because that's the kind of person Graham Norton is. But what Margot did, what she said, it spread like wildfire. People who were in the audience started posting about it immediately. So clips of the confrontation were online within minutes. And the reaction was swift and brutal. Nobody was on Margot's side. Nobody thought Graham had done anything wrong. Everyone was asking the same question. Why would she act like that? Some people speculated she was having a bad day. Some people thought maybe she was dealing with something personal. But here's the thing. Even if you're having the worst day of your life, you don't get to treat people like garbage, especially someone who's just trying to do their job. Graham Norton didn't deserve that. The audience didn't deserve that. And the other guests definitely didn't deserve to sit there and watch that meltdown happen right next to them. Let's talk about what actually happened during those 34 seconds that changed everything. Because it wasn't just one comment. It was a buildup. It started the moment Graham made that harmless joke about her being on a press tour. Her response, "Is that supposed to be funny?" was the first crack. But it was the way she said it. The tone. The contempt. Like Graham was some amateur who didn't know how to do his job. Except Graham Norton has won more awards than most people can count. He's interviewed everyone from Hollywood legends to musicians to politicians. He knows exactly what he's doing. And when she followed up with, "Maybe you should try being funnier instead of stating the obvious," that was the moment people watching at home started to turn on her. Because it wasn't constructive criticism. It wasn't even a joke. It was just mean. It was someone punching down at a person who was being nothing but kind to them. Graham's response, "Noted. I'll work on that," was perfect. It was gracious. It was funny. It diffused the tension, or at least it tried to. But Margot wasn't interested in diffusing anything. She was locked into this confrontational mode, and nothing was going to pull her out of it. When she said, "You're not that funny, Graham. You're just loud," that was the point of no return. Because that wasn't about the interview anymore. That was personal. She was attacking him as a person, not as a host. She was trying to hurt him, and you could see it on his face for just a split second before he composed himself again. That flicker of hurt before he put his professional mask back on. Graham has built his career on being likable, on being the person celebrities want to talk to. He's not a gotcha journalist. He's not trying to embarrass anyone or make them look bad. He just wants to have fun conversations that entertain people. And here was someone telling him, on his own show, in front of his own audience, that he wasn't good at his job, that he wasn't funny, that he was just loud. But even then, Graham tried to de-escalate. He said, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm just trying to have a conversation." That's all he was doing. His job. And she came at him again. Harder this time. A conversation? You call this a conversation? She wasn't asking a question. She was mocking him. And then she said, "You ask the same boring questions everyone else asks." Here's the thing about that comment. Every talk show host asks similar questions. That's how interviews work. You ask about the project they're promoting. You ask about their experiences. You try to get funny anecdotes or interesting stories. That's literally the format. But Margot was acting like Graham was uniquely terrible at something that every single host does. And then came the really nasty part. You think because people laugh at you that you're special? They're laughing because they're told to laugh. That was her trying to destroy him. Trying to make him feel like his entire career was fake. Like the audience didn't really like him. Like he was just a puppet going through motions and people were only pretending to be entertained. It was cruel. It was calculated. And it was completely uncalled for. The audience wasn't told to laugh. They laugh at Graham Norton because he's genuinely funny and charming. They laugh because he creates an environment where everyone feels comfortable and the conversations flow naturally. They laugh because he's good at what he does. Margot was trying to take that away from him. When Graham said, "I can only apologize if I've disappointed you, but I do think we should keep this respectful," he was giving her an out. He was being the bigger person. He was saying, "Let's reset. Let's be civil. Let's get through this, like adults." And she threw it back in his face. "Respectful? You want to talk about respect?" She was turning it around on him, like he was the one being disrespectful. Like he had done something wrong. "How about respecting my time? I flew all the way here to promote my movie, and you're wasting my time with this nonsense." She was a guest on his show. He was giving her a platform to promote her movie to millions of people. And she was calling it a waste of time. She was calling him nonsense. When the other guest tried to calm things down, Margot shut them down immediately. "Stay out of this. This has nothing to do with you." She was so locked into this fight that she wouldn't even let someone else try to help. She wanted the confrontation. She wanted the drama. Or maybe she was just so far gone in her anger that she couldn't see how badly she was coming across. That's when Graham finally put his foot down. "Margot, I don't know what's going on with you tonight, but this isn't okay." He wasn't yelling. He wasn't being mean. He was just stating a fact. "I've been nothing but welcoming to you. I've tried to make this fun, and you've been hostile from the moment you sat down." Every word of that was true. Anyone watching could see it. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be. He gave her a choice. He was still being respectful. He was still being professional. And he was telling her, if this is too much for you, if you're not in the right headspace, you can leave. No hard feelings. Just go. But the way Margot took it was as a challenge. She stood up. The moment she stood up, everyone knew it was over. There was no coming back from that. And then she said the words that would define this entire disaster. "You know what? You're right. I don't want to be here. This show is beneath me. This show is beneath me." Those 6 words told everyone everything they needed to know about how Margot saw herself in that moment. She wasn't just insulting Graham anymore. She was insulting the show. She was insulting the audience. She was insulting everyone who works on that production. She was saying, "I'm too good for this. I'm too important. I'm too famous. This is below my standards." The Graham Norton Show is one of the most prestigious talk shows in the world. Actors campaign to get on it. Publicists fight to get their clients booked. It's an honor to sit on that couch. And she called it beneath her. Graham's response was perfect. "Then I think it's best if you leave." He wasn't kicking her off. She had already decided to go. He was just confirming it. He was just making it official. And even then, he did it with grace. He didn't tell her to get out. He didn't have security escort her off. He just acknowledged that she wanted to leave and told her it was okay to do so. Her final words, "Gladly, have fun with your little show," were just the cherry on top of the disaster. She was still being condescending, still being dismissive, still acting like she was above everyone else in that room. And then she walked off. And the damage was done. Here's what makes this whole thing even more baffling. Margot Robbie had everything going for her. She's talented. She's successful. She's beloved by millions of fans. She had no reason to act like this. Graham Norton did nothing to provoke her. He asked standard questions. He made gentle jokes. He tried to make her comfortable, and she responded with hostility and contempt. Some people might say, well, maybe she was having a panic attack. Maybe she was dealing with anxiety. Maybe something happened before the show that put her in a bad mood. And sure, all of those things are possible. But here's the thing. Millions of people have bad days. Millions of people deal with anxiety. Millions of people have things go wrong before they have to go to work. And they don't lash out at innocent people. They don't insult someone who's being kind to them. They don't act like the world revolves around them. Graham Norton showed incredible restraint during that entire confrontation. A lesser host might have escalated things. A lesser host might have made snarky comments or tried to embarrass her even more. But Graham took the high road every single time. He tried to calm things down. He tried to be understanding. And when it became clear that there was no salvaging the situation, he handled it with dignity. The other guests on that couch were watching their colleague's self-destruct in real time. They had to sit there and witness this meltdown, knowing that there was nothing they could do to stop it. And when Margot told them to stay out of it, she made it clear that she didn't want help. She didn't want to be saved from herself. She was committed to burning every bridge in that room. After Margot walked off and Graham went to commercial, you have to imagine what was happening backstage. The producers were probably scrambling. The publicists were probably having heart attacks. And Margot was probably either doubling down on her anger or starting to realize the magnitude of what she'd just done. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done. The audience had seen it. The cameras had captured it. And within minutes, the entire world would know about it. When Graham came back from the break, he could have spent the rest of the show talking about what just happened. He could have made it the story of the night. But he didn't. He moved on. He focused on the other guests. He made sure they got their time to shine. He turned what could have been a complete disaster into a salvageable show. Because that's what a good host does. They think about everyone else, not just themselves. The audience that night got to see two very different types of people. They saw someone who let their ego destroy them in a matter of minutes. And they saw someone who, even when being attacked and disrespected, maintained his composure and his kindness. It was a masterclass in professionalism versus entitlement. Let's think about what Margot actually accomplished with her behavior. She didn't make herself look strong. She didn't make herself look important. She made herself look small. She made herself look like someone who can't handle the basic requirements of her job. And promoting movies, doing interviews, being pleasant to talk show hosts, that's part of the job. That's what actors sign up for when they become famous. You don't get to just do the fun parts. You have to do the press tours. You have to do the interviews. And you have to be professional about it. Graham Norton didn't ask her anything inappropriate. He didn't bring up scandals. He didn't try to embarrass her. He just wanted to have a nice conversation about her movie. That's it. And she turned it into a war zone. The saddest part of this whole thing is that it didn't have to happen. If Margot had just been civil, if she had just done the bare minimum of being polite, none of this would have occurred. She would have promoted her movie. She would have had some laughs. She would have left with her reputation intact. Instead, she chose to go nuclear over nothing. She chose to insult a beloved host. She chose to walk off a major talk show. And she chose to do all of it on camera, in front of millions of people. What was going through her head during those 34 seconds? Was she thinking about the consequences? Did she care? Or was she so caught up in her own anger that nothing else mattered? We'll never really know. But what we do know is that she had multiple chances to stop. Multiple chances to apologize. Multiple chances to just take a breath and reset. And she didn't take any of them. Graham gave her so many opportunities to turn things around. When she made that first snide comment, he laughed it off. When she made the second one, he tried to move on. When she kept pushing, he stayed calm. He was patient. He was understanding. He was everything a host should be. And she repaid him with cruelty. The line, "This show is beneath me," will probably follow Margot for a long time, because it revealed something ugly. It revealed that somewhere inside her, she believes she's better than other people. Better than the crew who work on that show. Better than the audience who came to see her. Better than Graham, who has entertained millions of people for years. That kind of arrogance doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't just appear in one bad moment. It's something that's been building. And on this night, it finally came out for everyone to see. Graham Norton could have destroyed her. He could have made jokes about her for the rest of the episode. He could have let the audience boo her as she walked off. He could have trashed her in interviews afterwards. But he didn't, because he's a class act. He took the high road, just like he always does. And in doing so, he made Margot look even worse by comparison. When you watch the footage back, and people have watched it millions of times now, you can see the exact moment things went from awkward to catastrophic. It's when Margot said, "You're not that funny, Graham. You're just loud." That was the line. That was the point where it stopped being just a difficult interview and became something uglier. Because she wasn't just being difficult anymore. She was being mean. There's a difference. Difficult guests happen all the time. Shy guests. Nervous guests. Guests who give short answers. Hosts know how to work with that. They know how to draw people out. They know how to make it work. But a guest who is actively trying to hurt the host, that's different. That's not nerves. That's not shyness. That's malice. And Graham handled it better than almost anyone else could have. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't get defensive. He just kept trying to do his job until it became impossible to continue. And when it became impossible, he ended it quickly and cleanly. No drama. No big confrontation. Just, if you want to leave, you can leave. Simple. Professional. Classy. The other guests on that couch probably have a story they'll be telling for years. The night they watched Margot Robbie melt down on live television. The night they saw someone throw away their reputation over nothing. The night they witnessed Graham Norton handle an impossible situation with grace and humor. This whole incident raises questions about celebrity culture and entitlement. How does someone get to a point where they think it's okay to treat people like this? How does someone become so disconnected from reality that they can't see how badly they're behaving? Fame can do strange things to people. It can make them forget that they're not actually better than everyone else. It can make them think the rules don't apply to them. And sometimes it can make them implode spectacularly on live television. Margot had every advantage going into that interview. She had a supportive host. She had an enthusiastic audience. She had a platform to promote her work. All she had to do was show up and be decent. And she couldn't even do that. She chose confrontation over cooperation. She chose ego over professionalism. And she paid the price for it. Graham Norton's reputation, if anything, got stronger after this, because people saw how he handled a crisis. They saw his kindness. They saw his restraint. They saw that even when someone is attacking him personally, he doesn't stoop to their level. He stays who he is, and that's why people love him. That's why his show has been successful for so long. Because he's genuine. He's not playing a character. He's just himself. And himself is pretty great. The moment Margot walked off that stage, she lost. Not because Graham kicked her off, but because she gave up. She quit. She decided that her pride was more important than her professionalism. And in the entertainment industry, that's a fatal mistake. People remember things like this. Producers remember. Directors remember. Other hosts remember. And they think twice before working with someone who's shown they can't be trusted to behave like an adult. This story isn't about what happened after the interview, because what happened after doesn't matter as much as what happened during. The damage was done in those minutes on that couch. The reputation was destroyed in that conversation. Everything else is just aftermath. But those moments, those specific interactions, that's where the real story is. That's where we see who people really are when they're under pressure. Graham Norton showed us exactly who he is. A professional, a gentleman, a person who treats others with respect even when they're not getting any in return. And Margot Robbie showed us something too. Something she probably wishes she hadn't.